Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Shuchandra Ghosh, Professor, Department of Ancient Indian History and Culture, University of Calcutta. The subject is Indian culture and the paper is Indian polity. I am going to discuss with you the module on post-Mauryan polity in North India, which is actually showing a relation between religion and power. In this module, the main learning objectives are that in this period we find that North India experienced the incursion of the foreign powers, and therefore it is necessary to understand the nature of the political organization, how they actually ruled, what were their strategies of ruling. And then there was also presence of non-monarchical powers. So we had the monarchical group and the non-monarchical group. The functioning of these Ganashanghas was different from the monarchical state. So it is imperative that the students should be acquainted with these. Now when we look at the post-Mauryan period, this is a period which ranges from circa 200 BCE to circa 200 CE, and it is noted for its growing importance to monarchical state system. This period happened with the disintegration and decline of the Mauryan powers. During this time, an interesting phenomenon happened. Groups from Western and Central Asia intervened into the politics of the region and played an important role in the polity. These were the Greeks, who are known in Indian sources as the Yavanas, the Indo-Scythians, that is the Shakas, the Indo-Parthians, the Pahlavas, and the Kushanas. Parts of the Mauryan Empire in North India were ruled by the Shungas, as we know that it was Vidya-mitra Shunga who actually dethroned the last Mauryan emperor. And the Shungas were followed by the Kanvas. Then we have in eastern India, particularly in Orissa, the reign of Caravela of Kalinga in around 30 BCE. And significant is the presence of non-monarchical powers, which could be seen in certain parts of western and central India who migrated from the Punjab area. So their original habitat was Punjab. From Punjab they had actually migrated to regions of Gujarat and some areas of central India. But we have to remember that in this period, following the Mauryas, there was no pan-Indian political power. So we had small rulers, principalities, and of course the big foreign powers who ruled in our country for a brief period of time. Now, because of this incursions of the foreigners and their intervention, this period has been seen as a period of dark age, and this is the earlier perception of the period. So if you look at the historiography, what people, the nationalist historians were writing, then we find that the rule of the Yavanas, Shakas, Pahlavas and Kushanas has been seen as an age of foreign, within quotes, foreign invasions and a dark age. And this perception of dark age continued. Even A.L. Basham, in his famous book Wonder That Was India, has a chapter and it calls this period a dark period. So it was largely drawn from the Puranic literature, which saw this period as the period of moral degradation resulting in crisis in social life. This is the Kali Yuga crisis which we find in the Puranic literature. We have the Yuga Puranas and the Gargi Samhita, which talks about the crisis and perception of a dark age. But when we study the sources of this period, which are epigraphical, numismatics and textual, we find that no such condition occurred, and this period stands out with respect to cultural acculturation and celebration of pluralism. It is a period where we have multiple people, different kinds of people and diversity in our cultural life, and much has been learned, and India actually received a lot and India gave a lot during this period. Monarchy, as I said, was very important, and there are certain markers of growing monarchy. Now what are these markers? We find that in the Mauryan period, in spite of the vastness of the empire, in spite of Ashoka ruling over the pan-Indian Mauryan Empire, he calls himself only Raja. But the characteristics of this period is that the monarchs in this period use grandiose titles. Thus we see the use of titles like Maharaja, Raja Raja, Rajati Raja, Shahnana Shah, which was used by the Kushanas. So the Kushanas, the Greeks, in Greek they used to write Basilios, Basiliantos, and whether they were sometimes, which was translated as Raja, Raja Raja, Rajati Raja, and the Kushanas, when they came to power, they started using the title Shahnana Shah. So Kanishka was known as Shahnana Shah Kanishki Kushana. Another very interesting feature of this period, and which shows growing monarchical formation, is that the Vedic sacrifices like Ashwamedha, Rajashua, etc. were performed with a view to augmenting royal power. So Ashwamedha sacrifice, as you know, actually depicts, or it's a projection of the power of the ruler. And the Sunga ruler, Pushyamitra Shunga, performed Ashwamedha sacrifices. In one of the inscriptions of later period, that is the Ayodhya inscription of Dhanadeva, he is known as the Ashwamedha Jajin, which means he performed the Ashwamedha sacrifice twice. Now when we look at the structure of the polity, or how these rulers were trying to project their powers, we find that there was a very strong relation with the divinity. So divine intervention were always called upon, or always being adhered to. So, and looking at the theoretical treatises of this period, we find that these also uphold the concept of divine creation or divine origin of the kingship. The Manusmriti explains that Prajapati, that is the creator, created the king by combining the essence of divinities like Indra, Varuna, Vayu, Yama, Agni, etc. More or less, a similar description also figures in the Ramayana, which presents the king as someone who must not only be always obeyed, but revered too. Manyascha Pujyascha Nityada. Every time he should be obeyed and also revered. So this shows that how Manu was perceiving a ruler. The divine connection is very much established here with this statement. Thus relation between the god, like with polity and divinity, forms a crucial aspect of the polity of the period. And therefore we are talking more on, our thrust is more on this. Now we will have some case studies, and to begin with we shall look into the scenario of the Bactrian and the Indo-Greek rulers. For these groups we do not have any inscriptions, and our main sources are the coins. We find from the coins that there were multiple Greek rulers in the and in the Bactrian Greek and in the Greek kingdom. Therefore, naturally, there was rivalry and conflict. And what is interesting is that it is not that one ruler was following the other ruler. You have different rulers at the same time ruling in different pockets. So there was this ambience of contestation. So whenever there is contestation, then they were trying to draw upon the deities whom they considered as their patron. So this conflict may be understood from the use of reverse deities in their coins. The deities that were represented in their coins were Zeus, Apollo, Athena, Dionysus, Heracles, and the Dioscuri, which were very popular choices, though other deities were Poseidon, Nike, Hermes, Dionysus, Tuke, Helios, Artemis, and they were also not less frequently represented. We shall see that these gods were not random choices, but they were chosen by the Bactrian and Indo-Greek rulers, and they were represented by the symbols of power. For the consolidation of the power, these successors of Alexander used a certain sets of deities who symbolized strength and power among the Olympian deities. There were actually 12 deities in the Olympian group. Now have a look at these different deities presented in the Greek coins. We have representations of Zeus, who actually was the father of the Greek deities. Then we have Poseidon, who represents similarity with, there is similarity with Shiva. Then we have Heracles sitting on a rock with his club. Then again we have the Dioscuri. They are very important representations of the two brothers, Castor and Pollux. And then we find that Heracles crowning himself. So these are very important depictions which are related to power and patronage. On the other hand, it is not that the Greek rulers represented only the Greek divinities. We have one or two rulers like Agathocles and Pantaleon who thought of the Indian population too, and therefore Shankarsana is depicted on the obverse in the coin with the legend in Greek, while Vasudeva is represented on the reverse with the legend in Brahmi. This suggests a period when Shankarsana was at the head of the cult of the 5 Vrishni heroes, that is the Panchavira of the Bhagavata religion, and therefore he is represented in the obverse. This is the famous coin which I was talking about, and here you can see the representation of Shankarsana and Vasudeva, where you have, this is the first anthropomorphical representation of these rulers. Now, why they were doing this? Why they were representing deities that were very important, very powerful, and who actually exuded power? So this was the reason that they wanted to show the projection of power. The royal coinage was carefully designed to enhance the image of a courageous ruler, giving the public a chance to see the king's portrait. And therefore, it was the Indo-Greeks and the Bactrian Greeks who actually introduced portraiture in their coinage. You can actually differentiate between Euthydemus and Demetrius and Eucratides, which of course the later coins tried to follow, but they were not very successful. So portraiture was only with this Indo-Greek and Bactrian Greek coinage. And to identify the gods or heroes whose powers the kings were shared and wielded, they tried to project their through the divinities. The Hellenistic identity through the portrayal of the deities was also very actively claimed and cherished. Therefore, if you look at the reverse deities of these rulers, you will find that it is mostly the Hellenistic gods and goddesses that were represented, which was not the case with the Kushanas. Now we come to a period which is the period of the successors of the Greek in the East. And who are the successors? The successors are the Indo-Scythians, Indo-Parthians, Shakas were also Shakas. So these successors of the Greeks continued the Greek tradition of portraying gods on coins and also appropriated the iconography of Greek deities for their own gods. They were known as Hellenophile because they were lover of Hellenic culture perhaps and were emulating their coins. But in addition to that, their coin also reflects a desire on the part of the rulers to incorporate local deity within the pantheon, and this was a very important step which the Scytho-Parthians or the Indo-Scythian rulers took forward. Maurus was a very important ruler who ruled in the Taxila region, and he actually combined the represented attributes of Zeus, that is thunderbolt, and Poseidon, a trident, to represent Shiva-like deity. So we have in his coins on the reverse the representation of Poseidon, who is actually similar to Shiva. Then we have a coin of Agilices where we find the local goddess Lakshmi is being represented. Agilices issued coins where Lakshmi is standing on a lotus pedestal holding 2 lotuses, and with the 2 lotuses arising in either side we have the elephants who are anointing her. So it is the Abhisheshinchana of Lakshmi type, which is also popularly known as Gajalakshmi type. So this was a very indigenous type which was introduced by Agilices in the coins, and it belonged to the Mathura region. You can have a look at the coins of Maurus and Agilices. So here you have Poseidon, Zeus, and on the other hand you have Lakshmi on the reverse of the Agilices coins, where you can see the 2 elephants who are standing on the lotus, and they are actually anointing or putting water on Lakshmi. This is a very interesting coin type which one should take into account, because here you find the Greek goddess 2K, who is the Greek city goddess, and she is also the goddess of fortune. So on the obverse you have a king sitting on a horse, and on the reverse you find that the satrap is standing right to facing the Greek city goddess and goddesses of good fortune, 2K, standing to left. 2K holds a diadem wreath as if ready to crown the satrap, and also has a cornucopia. Cornucopia is the wealth, it shows it's a marker of wealth. Now from the successors of the East, if we move further, we find that we have a new empire, called the Kushan Empire. The Kushanas were a very important group who came from Central Asia, nomadic group, settled in Afghanistan region, and then entered into the Indian subcontinent and ruled quite a number of areas in the Indian subcontinent. These Kushanas also believed in the notion of divine sanction, and we find that with their advent, small territorial kingdoms in the Indo-Iranian borderlands gave way to an empire. So earlier, during the time of the Indo-Greeks, we had small groups ruling in pockets, so you have small kingdoms. Interestingly, the Greeks were following the legacy of having the legacy of Alexander, but they did not follow and form an empire because there were continuous contestations. On the other hand, the Kushana rulers, who were nomadic without having any kind of legacy of forming an empire, they became settled and formed a large empire which extended from Central Asia to South Asia. This was achieved through political integration of the region and transformed the Kushan principality in Bactria into a massive empire. This empire included portions of Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, parts of Chinese Central Asia, northwestern borderlands of the subcontinent, Mathura, and at times beyond Mathura till the Ganga plains and till Bhagalpur in Bihar. You can see in the map the vastness of the Kushan Empire. We only deal with the South Asian portion of the empire, which relates to the Indian territory. When the Kushans were claiming divine status, it was one of the principal modes through which the rulers could get unconditional support from the subjects with variant ethnic identity but having invariant faith on the divine. This means that there may be a lot of people of different groups, different linguistic backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, but generally we find that all of them have support or have belief on the divinity. So therefore, the Kushanas were trying to have this invariant people come together with the idea of a cult of the empire or the cult of the emperor, which we shall see later on. They were using the title Devaputra as the dynastic epithet, and they were always known as Devaputrasa, and Kujula Katphises used it in his coins. The idea of divine origin of kingship was imbibed and propagated across the empire. The Kushanas even chose their coins as a vehicle for emphasizing their divine connection. So coins were the medium through which the Kushana rulers actually acted. Often on the obverse of the coins, the Kushana rulers projected themselves with a halo behind their head, which means that there is a relation with God. Then the nimbate figure of the ruler represented him as a supramundane being, often showing him as emerging from the clouds, an obvious indicator of the closer to divinity status. We will see coins where we have rulers depicted as if they are emanating from the clouds. Then the scepter which the Kushana rulers uses, of course, indicated the royal authority or prerogative to punish the subjects. We have the ruler called Vashishka, who uses the title Deva Manusha. So there is the title Devaputra, and again there is the title Deva Manusha, or a god in human form in the Kamra inscription. This has a striking correspondence to the famous dictum of Manu that even an infant ruler should not be disobeyed, as he was verily a great god in human form. Here you can see the king emerging from clouds. The king is sitting and the bust of the king is there, and on the reverse you have the representation of Oesha Shiva. So again Vima Katphises, and look at the posture of the king. He is sitting in a very nomadic posture. He has kept his nomadic attire, the long Central Asian coats, and you can see flames coming out from behind his shoulders, and it suggests his divine connection. Huvishka also shows this circle, which shows that Huvishka is nimbic. The circle shows that he is similar to having a divine connection, and on the reverse we have Pharaoh. Pharaoh is an abstract god who is representing the empire. There was another very interesting element in Kushan polity through which they projected their power, and that was the building up or construction of dynastic sanctuary. Significant is the fact that in the Rabatak inscription of Kanishka, he is given the attribute Bhago, that is God himself. So throughout we have seen that Kushana ruler was known as Devaputra, that is the son of God. He is known as Deva Manusha, God in human form. And suddenly we come to a stage in Kanishka's time that he is considered as the ruler himself. He calls himself Bhago. And so the Kushana ruler is elevated from son of a god to God himself. The claim for royal divinity and divine descent assumes a spatial position, therefore, in the Kushana polity. As I mentioned, that apart from using coins, this idea of constructing sanctuaries, that is temples, in which is called in Sanskrit or Prakrit Devakula, was brought about, and these were known as Bogolango, Bogoporo in Bactrian. I've already mentioned that these were known as Devakula in Sanskrit or Prakrit inscriptions, and they also became the objects of worship. In these Devakulas, we have the representation of the Kushana ruler. For example, Vima Katphises is there, then we have Kanishka and other rulers, Huvishka and other rulers too. You can see the location of Surkotal and Rabatak. These are the two places. Surkotal has yielded a sanctuary. Rabatak inscription talks about the building up of sanctuary, where you have, along with the gods and goddesses, the images of the kings will be actually worshipped. So in this inscription only Kanishka calls himself Bhago, and on the Indian side in Mathura, which is the place is called Mat, very near Mathura, we have another Devakula dynastic sanctuary built by the Kushanas. And through these sanctuaries, the cult of the empire and the emperor was being brought about. This was definitely a political strategy which was pointed out by B.N. Mukherjee. And he suggested that the deification of kings, the practice of installing and worshipping their images in shrines, and people's veneration for them led to the foundation and growth of the cult of the emperor. Cult of the emperor actually acted as a cementing factor in an empire which accommodated immense diversities of ethnic and linguistic groups, religious beliefs and cultural practices. So therefore, by imbuing this kind of idea that the god is, the king is like a god, you cannot question the god, he is worshipped, he becomes a cult figure, the Kushana monarchs were trying to actually put through the unification of their empire. Now we have talked about the foreign rulers, the Bactrian Greeks, Indo-Greeks, the successors of the Indo-Greeks like the Indo-Scythians, Parthians and Kushanas. Apart from these powers who were ruling in this part of time, that is the postmodern period, we have another group of powers who are known as the Ganashangas. They were mainly from Punjab region, and they finally moved into regions of Rajasthan and Western India. So the Ganashangas were often called tribes, and they shared a space in the valleys of Punjab which were watered by the 5 Punjab rivers with the powers like the Indo-Greeks, the Shakas and the Kushanas during the time frame 2nd century BC to 3rd century CE. The signature was their numismatic issues, and in some cases seals and sealings, which tell us that in course of time they migrated from their home in Punjab to arid Rajasthan or other areas, and they followed non-monarchical structure of polity as against monarchical polity. So their polity was completely different from the monarchical polity of the Kushanas or the Guptas or earlier the Mauryas. So this Ganashanga tradition of the Punjab plains did not provide much space for the Brahmanical structure. They did not have the Varnashrama Dharma, so they were not following the typical Chaturvarna system, and therefore they were not also into the main structure of monarchical legitimation. Interestingly, Brahmanical literature are completely silent about the functioning of these Ganashangas. We know about these Ganashangas only from the Buddhist literature. Now, Ganashangas were present right from the time of the Buddha, and you have a separate section on this. But here what we find that during the post-Mauryan period, the Ganashangas which were there in the Mauryan period, they were naturally subdued because the Mauryans had complete control over the regions which they once ruled. But in the post-Mauryan period, they again, with their resilience, came into the forefront. The groups that we can see are Malavas, Shivir, Vishni, Kuninda and Yodhya. All of them issued coins, had inscriptions on the coins, and therefore were very important tribal or within quotes tribal or Ganas. The emergence of the Kushanas as a unifying political agent between the crossroads and the Ganga Valley was not a happy situation for these small but fiercely independent groups who had their own coinage and believed in the Ganashanga form of political organization. So it goes without saying naturally that they did not like to or prefer to live under the Kushanas. So therefore, when their territory were taken over by the Kushanas, they migrated from the Punjab region to across the area to the deserts and to Rajasthan and Western India. Their reverse devices also shows their choice for deities. Thus the Yodhyas, who are known as Ayudha Jevi Shanga in Panini, which means that they survived on warfare, they used the war god Kartikeya as their reverse device. You can see here in the Yodhya coin the representation of the war god Kartikeya, where he is wearing his scepter and the cock is beneath there. Then we have another representation, that is the 6-headed Kartikeya, Sharanana, standing facing with one hand on hip, hand on the other is raised, with traces of Brahmi legend, Bhagavata Swamina Brahmanya Devasya Kumarasya, which is written around in a very dilapidated state. And on the reverse we had 6-headed goddess Shashti, that is the consort of Kartikeya, standing facing. Now we have seen that in this period religion played a very important role in the political structure. The divinities were used by the rulers, and it is quite evident that the interaction between power and religion in the region of our study could be understood from two different perspectives. At one level, we have projection of authority, the claim of legitimation through the association of deities who exuded power, and at another level, the trend is towards acknowledging the local. By acknowledging the local, I mean the use of local gods and goddesses. For example, you have already seen, take the case of Agilices. Agilices was an Indo-Scythian ruler, and he used Lakshmi or Abhishinchan of Lakshmi device in his coins. So that is acknowledging the local. And interestingly, it appears that the Bhagavata cult was emerging as a cult of the period in case of the Northwest India. And here I would like to remind you of the Besnagar pillar inscription, where you find that a Greek called Heliodorus, he was actually transformed into a Bhagavata, and he built up a Garuda Dhwaja in Vidisha. Syncretism resulted in the emergence of new forms and innovative ideas in the representation of images. This was also to be remembered, that syncretistic tendencies emerged in this period, and this can only happen when there is cultural acculturation. Therefore, in no way can we think that this was a dark period as it was perceived in the earlier historiography. To create a deity from elements of other well-established gods indicates a certain religio-political program of integration of a multicultural society. So therefore, it is important that that is how Poseidon could be created, taking images from Zeus and also from Shiva. The depiction of bewildering varieties of coins of deities in the coins of the Kushanas belonging to different religious beliefs in the empire indicates promotion of pluralistic religious practices, and no particular religion dominated. If you look at the variety of the divinities, you will find that the Iranian, the Hellenistic, the Indian, all of the deities, even Buddha was represented in the coins of Kanishka and Huvishka. As for the representation of Masena, Vishaka and Skanda in the coins of Huvishka, it is possible that here was an attempt to appropriate Kartika, as he was the main war god of the Yodhyas, who emerged during the time and was a threat to the monarchy. And this gets support from this inscription of Rudradaman, where he says that he defeated the loathful Yodhyas, which means that Yodhyas had been emerging as an important power in around 2nd century CE. The kingdoms prior to the Kushan Empire were simply territorial states. But here we find that the Kushana state was based on territory, trade and agricultural production. The principal feature of the empire was its military character, which was reflected in the attire of the rulers and the choice of the deities represented on the coins. Therefore, you have deities who actually project power. The military character is also represented by the horses. They were always seen riding on horses in most of the coins, and there was an attempt to legitimize what they achieved by their armed strength through the idea of divine intervention. They could understand that through this idea of the cult of empire or the emperor, they could actually cement or they could make or unify the entire Kushana Empire, which was very vast. So the use of religion was very important to the very existence and consolidation of the Kushana state. So now when I have discussed this with you, your task will be to read the e-text, find out the details, and you should read not only this e-text, but you should also read the text on Kushana coins, the text on Greco-Bactrian coins, and if you cover them both, then you will find that they will give you a significant holistic picture and you will understand the situation much better. Thank you.